So welcome to Organic Production, and we have many organic experts with us today. Lauren Tonti will be from NOFA, New York, will be leading the presentation, but she's joined by many others, Caleb Goossen and Chris Grigsby from MOFGA, and Robert Perry also from NOFA, New York. So plenty of expertise on the call today to answer all your questions specific to organic production.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Tonti. I am Certification Co-Director with NOFA New York Certified Organic. We are an organic certification organization based in Binghamton, New York. We certify operations in New York and some states that border New York as well. So I'm just gonna go right in here. So we'll have some time at the end for questions. So if you can hold on to them until later, that'd be great because there's a lot of content to cover. But if you have a pressing question or a clarification question, feel free to jump in if it's really important. So I'm just going to cover the certification process, and through that talk a little bit about the USDA National Organic Program regulations. And I'm mainly going to be talking about them as they apply to hemp production and processing, because going through the entire, process is just way more than can be covered in an hour presentation. But I will say that NOFA New York is hosting a winter conference January 16th through the 23rd, which if you want to get some more information about certification or any other great content, then you could attend our conference and get some information about that on our website. We give a lot more in-depth information about certification there. We'll talk about documentation requirements, record keeping, and then we'll have our Q&A. So just to clarify, because a lot of people do ask this question is, what's the difference between USDA Organic and NOFA New York Organic? Well, not a whole lot at all, really, except we're a certification agency. We are accredited by the USDA National Organic Program to implement the USDA National Organic Program regulations. So these regulations came into effect in 2002. Based on the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990. And this is the basis, the rules that all certifiers have to follow to implement organic certification for their farmers and processors. So the National Organic Program accredits independent agencies to perform the certification program. So we are accredited. We certify over 1,000 farms and processors in New York, in states that border New York, and a few scattered around the country here and there. So we perform, it's a third-party verification of compliance to the organic standards. We offer high integrity certification services. We have a lot of staff. We have really great customer service, brand recognition, and we are the leading hemp certifier in New York State. So the annual certification process is cyclical. An operation, whether they're new or they're continuing, submits a complete application and their fees. We start the process for them. We do an initial review of their application. So our certification specialists review in depth all of the documentation that this operation is submitting for certification, and we have to verify that it meets the regulations. And then we send them a review letter that explains what they need to have ready for their inspection, request some clarifications, some more information that may be needed to understand their organic system plan, and what records they need to have ready for their inspection. And then the inspector is assigned. The inspector schedules an inspection with the operation. They go through and they conduct all aspects of the inspection. I'll talk about that later. And then they the inspector sends their inspection report back to the office, goes through a final review with our certification specialists, and who go in depth, look through all aspects of the report, make sure everything is compliant, or if it's not, what's needed. A decision letter is provided to the operation and their organic certificate. ask them for many potentially areas that need to be improved, items that need to be submitted, things like that. And then the cycle goes around again. So it's an annual process. Every certified operation goes through this every single year. The first year is the most tricky because we're getting them set up, they're getting used to the regulations, they're getting used to our process, but the following years get to be a little bit easier, more streamlined for the operation. So just some general time frames that we're looking at for certified operations. You know, if their application, this just shows you the time frame of like, if their application received, when are they going to be completed by? So I won't go through this, but you can see there, and I know this presentation is available to everybody later on as well. So if you ever need to reference this, this is just kind of a good snapshot. You know, we try to say that within 3 to 4 months, a new applicant who submits their application should be certified within 3 to 4 months. That's a pretty reasonable time frame. For new applicants, we often accomplish it much sooner than that, but that's what we can often say and be accurate about. The other important thing is we for all new applicants, we do our best to get them certified by the cost share deadline, which is September 30th. I'm going to talk about that later. But you know, applications that we receive after August 31st for new applicants are not guaranteed completion before the end of the year. Operations that are already certified, they remain certified unless they surrender or are suspended or their certification is revoked. So really it's new applicants that we focus a lot on their initial certification time frame. So for hemp operations that submit a new application, say in June, you know, if it's for CBD or if it's for grain, you know, we try to make sure we can get everything, we can get them certified before they need to market that crop as organic. Because a very important thing that everyone should know is that products cannot be marketed as organic until that operation has received their organic certificate and that crop or that processed product is listed on the organic certificate. So the cost share program is a very important thing to note, which really helps operations attain affordable certification, or sort of affordable. Unfortunately, this program has been cut this year, and so operations that are approved for organic certification can receive 50% of their annual certification fee per scope, up to a maximum of $500 per year. So the scopes, there's 4 scopes. There's crops, livestock, handling, and wild crops. So this, you know, the cost share program used to be 70% of their annual certification fee per scope, up to a maximum of $750, but that has been cut for the next 3 years. Maybe we'll see a change with that, hopefully, but as of now, this is the new normal. So in New York, we do work with our New York State Department of Ag and Markets, so that all certified operations with NOFA-New York, all they need to do is fill out that 1-page application with Ag and Markets to get their reimbursement. We supply the organic certificate and the fee documentation for our producers, so it makes it a lot easier. There is a program through FSA that farmers can apply through, but we don't work with them because FSA has chosen not to work with us on this process. So it's just a little bit harder. And I think my understanding from a lot of our farmers who have applied through that is they're challenged with FSA. And Chris, I see you shaking your head, so perhaps you're experiencing the same problems. But and again, new applicants have to be certified by September 30th to be eligible for that year. If they aren't certified by then they can get reimbursed the following year, but they'll just take longer for them. And then operations that are already certified, they don't need to have their renewal certificate by the September 30th deadline. This is just new applicants. So it's seemingly affordable to get certified, though unfortunately this cut to the cost share program has been a huge blow. So an organic system plan is the living document of how an operation is going to manage their production system to the organic regulations. So we have a template application for a crop producer, for a livestock producer, et cetera. We also have a short one for hemp producers. Talks about the equipment they're using, all the fields that they're going to be certifying and using. We get maps and diagrams, inputs that they intend to put on their fields, their certified fields that have to be approved for use. We ask for hemp production affirmation, the application they submitted for their hemp authorization with their state program or perhaps the federal government, and then a hemp authorization or license. Just some basic land requirements for those of you who are less familiar with organic certification. No prohibited substances for the last 3 years could be applied to that field. This includes treated seed, GMO seed, any prohibited fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. So we ask for some information about any field submitted for certification, what's been applied to those fields in the last 3 years, and if anything is prohibited, which our certification specialist team will look at that. If anything's prohibited in that field, we'll have to transition from the date of that last prohibited treatment or a seed that has been applied. And if that land has not been managed by the operator for the last 3 years, then we need a sign affirmation from whoever was managing that land in the last 3 years to get the affirmation that they're the ones that have been managing the field and they can attest to what's actually been applied to that field in the last 3 years. And then another thing to note about organic is, the idea is it's not about replacing prohibited inputs for approved ones. It's a management system that includes tillage, cultivation practices that are maintaining or improving the physical, chemical, and biological condition of the soil. So I do encourage folks to look at the USDA website and see some of the fact sheets about organic management. I have a link to that at the end of this presentation. So a lot of this management needs to be managed through rotations, cover crops, plant animal material applications, things like that. So we want to see building of soil structure, monitoring for deficient excess nutrients, fallows, erosion controls, natural resource management, things like that. So just to go in depth a little bit about the information we need to see to verify organic certification of hemp is we have a 2-page organic system plan for hemp where we ask some specific information about how that hemp is managed. We ask for the application for permit that was submitted to the state. And so, we have most of our certified operations are actually all of them are currently permitted through New York State. But once the federal program is in place, then there will be, perhaps we'll start seeing some more permits from the USDA. But for now, this is all we've been seeing. We maybe have a couple that are in Pennsylvania as well. So, but we want to see the application that was submitted for permit. And the reason we do this is because we need to understand exactly what kind of production system and crops were approved by the state. So that's why our review team wants to look at the application. And we also need to see the GPS coordinates of all the fields to make sure that those fields that are approved by the state are approved for for the producer's organic certification. And then we want to see the permit that exact business is in fact permitted to grow this crop per this application. And then any application amendments, so any changes that are made to that producer's permit, we want to see those changes too so that we can make sure that any additional crops are then eligible to be certified. So crops that we certify: fiber grains, CBD, flowers, buds, seeds, transplants, microgreens, pretty much anything. Unfortunately, New York has just announced that they will not be allowing flour to be produced. So that's going to get tricky next year, because if it's not legally allowed, then we're going to have a hard time certifying that. So hopefully we'll see a change with that, but that's why I put a little asterisk there. We've seen a lot of feminization of seed. So any operation that wants to do this, you know, naturally induced feminization is allowed. There's not too many issues with that. We do want to see if any inputs are being used. You know, some people who are using aloe or some other fibrous materials, we just need to review that to make sure there's no prohibited materials in it. Now, chemically induced feminization gets a little tricky. So usually silver thiosulfate is used, or some other prohibited materials that are not allowed in organic certification. However, this material could be used on a mother plant, that then the pollen is pulled from that mother plant and used as an input on plants that can be eligible for certification. So that's kind of an important distinction to understand. The other piece is cloning and planting stock. We've seen a lot of operations wanting to use what's called planting stock, which is not the same as a seedling or a transplant. And so planting stock does need to be certified organic unless it is not commercially available in the needed quantity, quality, or form. So operations will just need to be checking that they're trying to source certified organic clones or planting stock, and documenting that they can't find it given those parameters. And then after that, they could source non-organic planting stock. And so annual seedlings or transplants, they have to be certified organic. There is no exception to that. The same with seed. Any seed that is sourced has to follow the same guideline as the planting stock. So seed must be certified organic unless not available in the needed quantity, quality, or form, and documenting that a search for organic was done. And then operations that want to use raw manure as an application on their fields. An organic crop can be harvested from 90 days from the date that raw manure was incorporated into the field. So I'm sure there's questions on all this stuff. So I'm prepared to talk about this at the end of the presentation. This just gives you a sense of what we like to see with maps. I'm sure all certifiers look for different things, and we're really flexible about what we collect, and we collect the weirdest maps, and you know, but we just like to see as much detail as possible so that our inspectors can go out to the field and truly verify, oh, this makes sense. This is the field that's actually being submitted for certification that matches the organic system plan. So it's all about the audit trail. It's all about verifying what's documented in the organic system plan. So inputs and their intended use. Again, organic certification is not about switching out conventional for organic approved materials. It's a system. There's a hierarchy. We want to see management. But when materials do need to be used, they have to be approved by the certifier before they are put down on the field. If it is not approved and it turns out it is prohibited material, it will very likely take that field out of certification. So this is a very important thing to stress to farmers, that they don't put anything down, even though they think it's got that OMRI seal on it, or it, you know, they think, oh, other certifier says it's okay, so why wouldn't NOFA-New York say it's okay? No, it's just always good to check first. There's a lot of false OMRI claims out there, so it's important. So we do have a material review program. I think almost every certifier does as well. And so we will review materials for approval. For new producers, we do that for free their first year, but then after that, we do charge a small fee to do that review for any other material that we haven't previously reviewed. We also we honor the approval of any OMRI. So OMRI is the Organic Materials Review Institute. This is a very well-known organization that reviews materials for organic production. California Department of Food and Agriculture, and then Washington State Department of Agriculture. We also honor their material approvals as well. So when a producer wants to use a material, we check to see, have we reviewed it, or has any of these other entities reviewed it for approval? If so, then it's allowed to be used as long as it is allowed or has a restriction. And if not, we offer to review it. Just a few things to note, just because something's approved for a crop input doesn't mean it's approved for a livestock input. Same with processing. So materials are approved for very specific usage. And let's see. Another thing, another thing to note is New York State has to approve certain pesticides to be used for crops. I know that this year, New York State, I think, did approve some pesticides to be used on hemp. And there's a few that are approved for organic use, but not most of them. So that's something important to know too. Just because it's approved for organic doesn't mean that the state is going to allow it to be applied. So again, something that producers need to be aware of. They need to communicate with the certifier, need to communicate with their state governing authority to make sure that they're putting down compliant materials. So a lot of people ask, well, can I produce an organic crop and can I also produce a conventional crop? And the answer is yes. The regulations do allow for this. There just has to be some parameters in place. So any equipment that's going to be shared, so any harvesting equipment, has to be cleaned or purged prior to being used on the organic crop. And so we do like to see this documented, or at least documented in the organic system plan as to how that's happening. So there just needs to be some protocol in place, and that all staff involved are understanding of these protocols so that there's no contamination of the organic crop from the conventional crops. Materials that are going to be used on conventional fields need to be kept segregated or somehow separate so that there's no confusion with employees or anyone that's going to be applying materials to certified organic fields. Again, if an accidental prohibited application is applied to an organic field, it's going to take that field out of certification for 3 years. So it's very important to be careful about this. Storage needs to have a clear system for segregation to prevent commingling. So, you know, if there's a large barn or a warehouse where someone's hanging organic hemp flower for CBD and then has another side of the barn where they're going to hang non-organic, there needs to be a very clear system to make sure that they're not commingling, right? And then bringing all those products to the processing and then to market. What's the system in place? What's the record keeping trail to make sure that all of this is kept segregated and then not sold as organic if it's a non-organic crop. So the inspection process, so our inspectors, they're really our boots on the ground. You know, here in the program, you know, we stay in the office. We are doing a lot of paperwork, we're interfacing with clients, but our inspectors are the ones that actually go out in the field, and they confirm that the organic system plan is being practiced as stated and per the organic regulations. So the inspector gets the file from the office, and then they schedule with the operation to come out and review all aspects of the operation: fields, storage, equipment, crops that are harvested, and all the records. So the audit of the records can be the longest part of the inspection, or sometimes just as long as verifying all the fields and greenhouses and things like that. So operations with very clear and complete records are going to have a more streamlined inspection. You know, again, organic certification is so much about an audit trail and about verifying from seed to sale. So it's so important to have really good records just documenting applied amendments and harvests and sales and all the different components that go into the process. So the more prepared an operation can be to have all their records, maps, all their ingredient product profiles, like all the records that they had to submit for certification, having that available for the inspector is going to be really important. So they're visiting, any aspect that's related to the organic system plan. So whatever maps have been submitted, facility diagrams, things like that, the inspector is going to want to see all of those locations. And just one thing to note is this year with COVID, we had to triage, or I should say we had to, create a contingency plan in terms of how we were going to conduct over 1,000 inspections since we couldn't go on site for a while when New York State shut down for a couple months. But we have been doing some hybrid inspections, so where the inspector may go visit some fields, some outdoor facilities, and then do the records audit through Zoom or through the phone or things like that. Or we've been doing some virtual inspections, which are just fully virtual, where the operation holds Zoom up, holds their phone up, and like is basically like the inspector is telling the producer where to point the camera. And then we've also done a lot of on-site inspections this year once New York opened up, and we had a safety plan in place to do that. So just so you're all aware, probably going to be something we have to deal with in 2021 as well, is this mix of these different kinds of inspections depending on what's going on with COVID. So just to get into processing a little bit, this gives you a little bit of a snapshot of product, processed product composition. So there's an 100% organic category, which is, these are all labeling categories. So 100% organic is a specific labeling category that is regulated. So all agricultural ingredients and processing aids must be certified organic. So for example, this would be, say, a CBD oil that is literally just, it's all MCT oil, it's all hemp oil, and any processing aids that are used are all agricultural and all organic. That could be potentially labeled as a 100% organic category. Now, if you throw in, say, using carbon dioxide as a processing aid, that will not be eligible for the 100% organic category because it is not an agricultural ingredient. So that could be the organic category, which is less than, which is more than 95% organic, certified organic ingredients. So that would be where like a processing aid or things like that can't be certified organic, and that's allowed as the organic category. And then there's the made with organic category, where at least 70% of certified organic produced ingredients are contained. And then there's the other category of less than 70% organic ingredients, where only on the ingredient panel can the word organic be used, and the USDA organic seal cannot be used in this case. So products that we will certify for processed hemp products that we will certify are CBD oil tinctures, salves, lotions, hemp flour, meal, and other kinds of processed food products. We can't certify anything that is explicitly illegal to produce, or products that are not approved under your permit. There's a little bit of inconsistency among certifiers in terms of what is illegal to produce. I'm not going to get into that right now. You'll just have to talk to your certifier, but we are certifying those items that I note above. Carrier oils have to be certified organic. Use of solvents must be certified organic or on the national lists. And then, so ethanol is something that is commonly used. And this can be used in products that are marketed in the organic labeling category, provided it's certified organic ethanol. There's some operations that choose to use non-synthetic, non-GMO ethanol, but that would only be eligible for the made with organic category. Carbon dioxide is an allowed synthetic extraction aid. And again, these are all materials that our review team has to review before they can be used in the formulation. that would be approved for organic certification. And then just one thing to note, we do see a lot of operations that choose to use a co-packer instead of process on their own. It's important that the co-packer is approved is certified organic, first of all, but also is certified organic to process hemp, because that would be our authorization that they are then authorized as a permitted hemp processor for their applicable state. So we do have to verify all ingredients that go into processed products. They need to come with a valid organic certificate. We like to see dated within 18 months of purchase. Some operations that are smaller scale may submit a label from a consumer-ready retail item. As long as it shows the certification information and the certifier, then we could accept that. But for the most part, it's really an organic certificate with the exact product listed on the organic certificate that we need to see and verify. Non-organic ingredients from the national list, we have some template forms that producers can use. We have a documentation of ingredients form to verify that that material or that ingredient being used meets the parameters on the national list. And then they all need to be produced without excluded methods, which are GMOs, sewage sludge, or irradiation. And just some information here about labeling requirements. Organic products in the 95 or higher % category may say organic. These are the examples of the different seals that can be used. And the certifier logo can be used if desired, but it cannot be more prominent than the USDA seal. So it can't be larger. It can't be like the bigger focus of the logo. This is the USDA regulations state this. So they may make a percentage statement. They have to include a certification statement below the company info. So it could say like, Green Acres Farm, certified organic by NOFA-New York, underneath that business operation. And then with hemp, it's important that there's no health claims being made on processed products or any products. We would not approve a label that does say that it is intended to prevent or treat or diagnose a disease, because that is explicitly not okay from the FDA. And again, labels have to be approved by the certifier before they are used, before they are printed. We get a lot of people who print labels and then they submit it to us for approval, and then there's a lot of problems with the label and we can't approve them. So that is a really important piece. When in doubt, just ask your certifier before you do anything. Just a couple notes about an audit trail. So we do need to track all certified products from origin to sale. And again, having this already at inspection is critical. We like to have samples of this in the office so that our review team can verify that that there's a clear audit trail process that is auditable for both the office and the inspector. We do supply all the template forms that an operation may need, though we do allow them to use their own record keeping system that we can audit as long as it contains all the information we need to do an audit. So an example of an audit is like a mass balance and a trace back. So we might look at a sales record, and then we want to trace that sale all the way back to the seed records, essentially. So we want to be able to connect to see what's the linking information from with all those records. And then a mass balance, for example, would be a producer says that they harvested, 2 tons of CBD hemp flower. And we want to, or they say they sold 2 tons of CBD hemp flower. Now we want to backtrack all the records and make sure that they actually harvested that and from which certified fields. So we're trying to have a really clear audit trail and make sure that we can verify all products that are being sold as organic. And then all records for organic certification must be kept for a minimum of 5 years. These are stated in the regulations as a requirement, and so we should be able to readily audit any information from the last 5 years if requested. This just gives an example of like some ways that we do some linking documents. And this is kind of a more advanced producer that has a pretty smart computer system and keeps a lot of electronic records. But again, you know, we're trying to find linking information, which you can see here. And this just gives you an example of an ingredient product profile and a master supplier list. So the master supplier list is a way for us to keep an organized list of all the ingredients that are being used in an operations production. And then the product profile is the specific information about each product that they are submitting for certification. So this would be like your CBD oil, perhaps, and list all the ingredients and the percentages. And then we have to do a little bit of math sometimes. So, and just to give you a sense of monitoring for continued compliance. So, you know, we have to do a lot more than just certify operations. We get audited as well. All certifiers have to get audited by the National Organic Program, and we have to do our own annual evaluations as well to make sure that we're doing our jobs well and to the highest integrity. And we do spot inspections or unannounced inspections. So we do a 5% of our certified operation base. We have to go out and do some unannounced inspections, make sure that things are on the up and up. And then we also do 5% residue testing. So we will take samples of certified crops or processed products and make sure that there's no prohibited materials contained within those samples. We also do a little bit of market monitoring to try to just like keep an eye on what organic claims are out there, especially with the use of the NOFA-New York name. And then we do some complaint investigation as well. So we get calls often from operations that may have a complaint against a NOFA-New York certified operation or against another operation that may be certified by another certifier, or maybe an operation that's not at all certified. And then we would either investigate that, or we would, you know, encourage that complainant to submit that information to the National Organic Program to do the complaint directly. So that's all I really have. There's just a link here to the USDA website where you could get some fact sheets. And I do recommend taking a look at what's there, because that could be really helpful for you as you're out talking to operations who want to be certified and just want some general information or fact sheets about certification, about the organic regulations. All the guidance documents are there too. So it's a very good resource to have that. So yeah, I know I just gave you all kinds of information, but feel free to ask some questions. Also, Chris and Robert may have some helpful information to share too about anything I said, or about Chris's program, or some of the work that Robert does with NOFA-New York. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. That was awesome. A lot of information. There were a lot of things popping up in the chat. You probably saw that. We do have some questions. Do you want me to read them to you? Is that easiest? Or
that's yeah, I wasn't actually looking at those.
Okay,
but now I see them, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll let you just keep it organized, and
I'll
follow
try.
you.
Yeah, it can be so distracting sometimes when you're watching it. You know, you start paying attention to that and like forget where you are in your presentation. Okay, the first question is, what of the disconnect? The 2014 Farm Bill, Section 7606, was explicitly worded and codified as fiber grain hemp only. The 2018 Farm Bill included cannabinoid-rich hemp. The NOP defers to the version of the Farm Bill being utilized. How is it a legitimate application of the organic label to certify cannabinoid-rich hemp in a state that is still relying upon the 2014 Farm Bill? Woo! There.
Yes, very good question. So there's been a lot of inconsistency in how this has been handled by almost every agency. So last year, when the 2018 Farm Bill, or when the 2018 Farm Bill was passed, we were, you know, all certifiers were kind of working under the assumption that we could work under the 2018 Farm Bill, that definition. And so we started doing that. The NOP told us at our training that we could do that as well. New York State was still functioning in that way on paper, but was also approving applications for permit that followed the 2018 Farm Bill. So we were certifying only operations that had permits with New York State, right? So we're just following bureaucratic process. So in our mind, if New York State says it's allowed, then we can certify it, because the National Organic Program is saying, if your state says it's allowed, you can certify it. So.
All right.
Chris, maybe you have some other insights into that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, generally the challenge is we're navigating a federal regulation, you know, amongst a bunch of different states that may have differing sets of rules within their state permitting process. I guess I don't, in Maine, that isn't the case. And I think, Lauren, I think you had mentioned a while back in some communication that New York State was prohibiting CBD flower production, which again seems to kind of go against the 2018 Farm Bill, the will of Congress and whatnot. So, I mean, I'm curious to see if there'll be any litigation against New York State for that decision. I'm sure that there would be, just because of adverse effects of that decision with some of the producers there.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions, or just clarification. Somebody said, I'm confused. New York will outlaw flower? So no production of CBD cannabis? So can you just,
Right.
so there were a couple of questions about that. I think just trying to clarify. Please repeat what was said about New York State hemp licensure, flower, and organic certification.
Right. So, I mean, right now, we are certifying operations that produce flower, but New York just came out with their new program regulations for next year, and they didn't include flower in it. So I don't know that they're outlawing it, but they didn't include it in there. So I think there are a lot of, my hearing is that there's potentially going to be litigation against that and a push for a reversal of that. But I don't know. There has been a lot of things that keep changing, and the last couple months have been just a whirlwind of decisions being made and changes happening with the hemp regulations in New York. And I can't keep track of it. I think that most people cannot keep track of it. So I'm hoping that that's not going to happen for next year, because that will affect a significant amount, almost all the growers in the state, right? So if you're in New York, I would definitely push your elected officials to help you out on that.
And I guess I'll add one more point, Heather, which is just that anybody can go, the USDA, you know, domestic hemp program does have a current list of state and tribal territories that have either been approved with their plan or are in the process of, and things like that. And so I just pulled that up, and I noticed that New York still is listed as will continue to operate under the 2014 pilot. And I know that Maine used to be listed that way, but Maine Department of Ag did submit a plan to USDA earlier this year, and that plan was approved. So anybody can go to these, and if there is an approved plan, it's actually the PDF is right there on the site as well. So you can actually review the specifics of the plan that would have been approved by USDA. So that sort of means that, you know, I believe actually the interim domestic hemp rule, I think, allowed states to sort of do things through the end of October, but now it sort of shifts into the interim final rule for USDA. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a whirlwind, but I just noticed that they do still have some states listed as continue to operate under the 2014 pilot.
All right. There's a question about OMRI certification and pesticides, a couple of those, and I think, Chris, you were trying to address that in the chat, but one is, if a pesticide has OMRI certification and it has EPA approval for use on hemp, would a particular state still not allow its use on hemp? So if it has EPA approval for use on hemp specifically and OMRI certification.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'll just add, I know in Maine has a state law that authorizes the Board of Pesticide Control and requires all pesticides used in agriculture to be registered in the state of Maine. So I think that that's one additional step that the manufacturer would need to go through in order to, you know, have that be allowed. So yeah, OMRI listed, you know, EPA lists it for either all plants or for hemp, and then having, and I don't know if that's the case for all 50 states, but I know in Maine there is that additional approval process.
No, I think, I know it's the same in Vermont. You know, it also has to be approved on the Vermont list. You know, this is not a good example because it's not at all organic, but I mean, an example is like atrazine. You know, it's allowed in some states, but many states it's not. It's still, you know, has an EPA registration. It's definitely not approved for use in organic, but just an example of where some states still allow it and some states don't. So, so this would really be the same, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question that person asked, because yeah, maybe EPA approved, maybe OMRI approved, but New York State has to approve it too. Yeah, unfortunately.
So can a certified organic herbicide or herbicide with 25B label be used in advance of planting the crop? Can a 25B labeled product be used on hemp during the growing season?
So I am not familiar with 25B labeling, but so there are some herbicides that are approved for organic certification, but most of them have the restriction that they can be used in non-production areas as like management tools outside of the direct organic production area. They also absolutely have to be used as part of a hierarchy system. So you can't just burn down a crop using an approved organic material to plant to plant a new crop. So you have to be managing your weeds through management practices first, and then tillage practices, and and so after a variety of steps are taken, then you could potentially use an herbicide when all other methods are not working. And so I definitely encourage you to read the regulations on this, which I can send that out to Catherine to share with everybody, because that's kind of an important piece of this. But I'm going to say no, unless there's some really strong reasoning for why all other methods were tried and are not working. And then I don't know if I know that answers part of the question, but I guess I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you could tell me what 25B means, and perhaps I could provide some extra insight, or maybe Chris knows 25B labeling.
Yeah, yeah, I would say the same about the hierarchy that you listed. I mean, I think that there needs to be a real documented reason for an herbicide application, even if it was approved for organic use prior to planting of a crop. And as far as the 25B, so that's the minimum risk EPA list. And at least in my experience with Maine and the Board of Pesticide Control here, if something was on the 25B list, then it would be allowed to be used. But I don't know. I think John Jemison's on the call here too, so maybe he has or Mary Urlina might know too. But that's my understanding anyway.
Any other comments on 25B herbicide, labeled herbicides? John, do you know much about that?
I think you guys got it right. And we are still trying to figure out what we have lists of things that are allowed in hemp production. We have lists of things, but we don't have a list of things that are allowed necessarily for cannabis production for the medical or for recreational. And we're still working on that now. But basically we have a flow chart for them, and part of it starts with 25B is like one of several parts that are important in that flow chart decision making thing. But generally speaking, those are the minimal risk pesticides, and what Chris said is exactly right.
Okay. All right. Some next questions. There is a 3-year period for field recertification. What about greenhouse or container production?
Same period. Yeah. So greenhouses have to also, yeah, the exact same thing for greenhouses and container production. If it's transplant production in say a greenhouse that has a concrete floor, that could potentially change it to not necessarily need a transition period if the floor is permanent, but that might not necessarily be the case for every certifier. We certainly look at it that way. So the regulations do extend. I mean, this is actually something that's kind of new from the NLP, but the regulations do extend. The 3-year transition period does extend to greenhouses and container production. But if it's a permanent floor, then we don't necessarily need to look at the 3-year period underneath the concrete floor. Although if you're putting containers on that, then that's right, then that would apply to in the container if the container is somehow media that has had prohibited materials, and we're going to look at that.
Okay. A follow-up on the EPA OMRI question is if EPA OMRI and it's registered in the state, would the state organic certifier still disallow its use? Are there any examples of that?
It would, I guess, depend on potentially what the intended use would be. I mean, I think generally that statement is probably going to be something that the certifier would approve, but you know, again, the details, I think, yeah, the details would require, again, the certifier to just fully review that, including, you know, intended use and any, you know, potential hierarchy, documentation, you know, those types of things.
Yeah, I imagine too, like, yeah, intended use, that maybe that covers that. I guess I was thinking about specific situations where you maybe just shouldn't use it. I don't, you know, water quality, maybe something like that, but
Right.
it falls under intended use.
Yep. Well, there's definitely, you know, the regulations do require that certified operations maintain or improve the natural resources of their operations. So if there's a risk to water quality with the use of a material or the way a material is used, then the certifier is going to have to, you know, I mean, then that could cause a potential non-compliance issue if that material is being used improperly. You know, there's a lot of materials that are approved for organic use that have restrictions, right? So like Chilean nitrate, for example, Chilean nitrate may be used, but it has to be used in a manner that will not contribute to the contamination of crops, soil, or water. So it's up to the inspector and the certifier to review how is this being used, maybe even audit, you know, do a mass balance of how much of the material has been used in a certain time frame to make sure that they're not overusing Chilean nitrate, right? That's just I think that's just one example. So yes, we have to look at not only is it approved, but how is it approved, what is it approved for, and how, yeah, and is it following all of the restrictions? There are some materials that have lots of different kinds of restrictions that we have to monitor.
Okay, we have a few more minutes left and a couple of questions, so maybe we can get through these last two. Does a retail reseller have to apply for their own USDA certification to market their product as USDA certified if they purchase USDA certified raw material flower from a grower and extract it for use in their end product?
Yeah, if they're processing it in any way or handling it in any way, then they would require their own certification. If it's a retailer that's just selling a finished product, then they would be allowed to sort of carry that through. You know, retailers are in the exempted category under the regulations, but anyone that is buying a certified organic ingredient, handling it, processing it in some way, and then, you know, wants to use that organic claim moving forward, then that would require certification.
All right. And there was some pesticide guidance provided both by Stephanie Smith and Mary Yerlina from Maine. So some guidance from Vermont and Maine I think will be helpful. And yeah, Caleb just put in the box, say this out loud. The take-home message is check with your certifier. And that's a really important take-home message because there's a lot of, there's a lot of considerations that have to be made in some of these decisions for sure. And every certifier is a little bit different. Okay, let's see here. I think there was one more question. I'm just wondering if we can't buy in New York, if we can't buy New York hemp, can we buy from other states?
Yes.
Okay, easy enough.
And if you're organic certified, then you have to buy certified organic hemp from whatever that producer is in that other state.
Okay, perfect.
And if there's another 10 seconds here, I just wanted to throw out another, just another point that I think everybody should be considering, especially when working with hemp farmers and producers, is the FDA elephant in the room. And so that definitely is something that's affecting organic certifiers, and there is a varying degree of what products are being certified and what aren't. And I think, at least I know NOFA-New York and MOFGA, we're at least MOFGA, we're taking the cautious approach, and we're not moving forward with certifying anything that would go against the FDA, the current FDA ruling around CBD and food adulteration.
Great. All right. Well, I want to thank all our speakers today and everyone that piped in with good information. That's why we have all these wonderful folks helping us. Any final comments from anyone, any of our advisors or speakers today?
Heather, this is Stephanie from Vermont.
Awesome.
I work for the Vermont Agency of Ag. I just wanted to say that the repeal of the 2014 Farm Bill didn't happen on October 31st of this year. It has been extended to September of 2021. I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that.